All right, there we go. So, divine greetings again for everyone who tuned in, and I hope you heard a few moments of that song, which I know we all know by Pharrell. I am happy, and it's interesting because that is a song that seems to get everyone up off the dance floor at weddings and parties, and get the little happy bug moving in them, even if it's only for a short period of time. So, I thought that song was very apropos. For tonight's subject, which is what is happiness truly? And of course, it is not from my own perspective, although I will share some of my personal experiences. It's based on Kemetic wisdom teachings, which is the basis of all of the talks with Goddess Aset. And so as we do, we always start with pouring libation. So those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we're going to pour libation, which is an African tradition, and that is just something that we honor on this platform. And we pour libation first and foremost in honor of the Creator, thanking the Creator for life. And then we pour libation for the cosmic forces, the Neteru, those energy beings that help to sustain life. And then for those ancestors, those martyrs that sacrificed their life for us. And then for our bloodline ancestors. So we're going to jump right in and do that because we have a lot to talk about this evening. So you can either stay where you are and just close your eyes and get into a place of reverence, or you can show a sign of reverence by getting down on a bent knee. Adoration to the Creator, manifesting everywhere and in all things. We thank and we honor you for life. We thank and honor you for every inhalation, every exhalation. We thank and honor you for every heartbeat. We give you appreciation not only through our mouth, but through our actions, and we pour libation in your honor. We thank and honor those cosmic forces, those Neteru, those Orishas, all of those entities and forces that work on behalf of sustaining creation, and on behalf of destroying the enemies of the Creator, and on behalf of establishing, sustaining, and maintaining Maat. We pour libation in your honor. We pour libation in honor of all those ancestors, those martyrs that came and gave their life, that made sacrifices so that life can be better. Those who dedicate their lives to making the world a more peaceful, harmonious, and better place. We pour libation in your honor. Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Dr. Francis Cresswell, W.E. Du Bois, Khalid Muhammad, and all those ancestors whose names you know and whose names you do not know. We honor you through continuing your vision and continuing to make the world a better place. We pour libation in honor of our ancestors. We pray for light, peace, and healing for our ancestors that are in the spiritual realm, waiting to come back. May they learn from us. May they watch us as we stand on their shoulders. May we make this world a better place so that when they return, they can propel forward. Ashe, 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 oh, Hetep. All right. So now we have poured libation in honor of those forces, cosmic forces, the Creator, and the ancestors that have made the way for us. And so we're going to go ahead and jump right into tonight's topic. And I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint presentation so that we can see it together. Okay, there we are. All right, so hopefully those of you who have thought about this particular talk have started pondering on this question, and hopefully you even have questions and comments ready. And feel free to drop those questions and comments in the chat at any time. So let's jump in. All right, so as always, we're going to start with some Kemetic scripture. And this is a Kemetic proverb. And these proverbs are taken from different Kemetic writings. So we have coffin texts, we have different papyrus written in dedication to different kings and queens and spiritual aspirants. And so these are the Kemetic proverbs are taken from a variety of sources. And actually, I get these Kemetic proverbs from a book written by Dr. Maat Ashby called Egyptian Proverbs. So the first one that we're going to talk about tonight is those who gave thee a body, furnished it with weakness, but the all who have the soul armed with resolution. The all who have, it should be the all who have given thee soul, armed thee with resolution. Employ it and you are wise. Be wise and you are happy. So right there, we're looking at our first little puzzle piece that helps to give us some insight into this concept of happiness from a Kemetic perspective. And so in this particular proverb, it's talking about the fact that we have that dual nature. And we talked about this in the previous two talks, right? Starting with the who am I, we talked about this aspect of the self that is the ego personality, and then the soul, and then both fighting over the will. And so this proverb kind of speaks to that as well. It's talking about the body component, right? Which is what the weakness, it belongs to, right? The weakness is of the body, right? The strength and the powers of the soul. And that's why the goal, if you remember from Talk 1, is to allow the soul to get the upper hand so that the ego, which is associated with the bodily functions and desires, can actually be utilized by the soul to attain higher consciousness. And so this proverb talks about that, and it also talks about the soul coming from that aspect of the creator. So we talked about, the body being the projection of the creator, but it's external while at the same time one with it, right? Kind of like I use the analogy of children. Two people come together to have a child, and even though the child is of those two people, it's a separate entity while at the same time being of those two people. And so this proverb is delineating between the fact that we have that mortal piece, right, that was made by the gods and goddesses. If you remember, I talked about the one creating the first act of creation, Kemet, and then from Kemet, the other creations came into being, eventually coming down to men and women. So this proverb is clearly talking about that, and it's separating us as being the creation of those subsequent creators, right? And the soul itself being a direct creation from divine source, right? From the supreme divinity. And it's letting us know that we have to develop a certain level of wisdom in order to be happy. And so we're going to talk about this wisdom because it's necessary in order for us to understand and manifest what happiness is truly. So from a Western linguistic perspective, the word happy simply means feeling of pleasure or contentment. And I underline the word feeling because we talked a little bit about, emotions being poor masters. And so we're going to kind of like jump into this whole concept of the feeling and how it dictates our happiness or hijacks hijacks our ability to be happy. So pleasure is a feeling of happy satisfaction and enjoyment, right? We kind of like all know that, what's pleasurable to us and what's not. And contentment is a state of peaceful happiness. And so I underline peaceful happiness because, as you see, as we continue to peel back the layers, how critical understanding the difference between these two is when we are understanding what true happiness is and moving towards manifesting that in our day-to-day lives. So, question, would you like to be happy all the time? Just based off of your understanding, if you could live in pleasure, in contentment 24/7, would you do that? Most of us probably think we would want to do that. But if you remember from the previous talk, I talked about the concept again of duality, right? Without one, the other ceases to exist. So what is pleasure? What does it feel like if there is no pain, if you don't know what pain feels like? And so we want to kind of like move into this understanding that the things we have been programmed to believe makes us happy are just, another level of illusion. And so, for most of us, even when we look at things from a higher philosophical perspective, there is a program still in our unconscious mind that has us believing that, wow, if I could live in this mansion, like Cardi B and whoever her boo is, I'm sure that would increase my level of happiness. Like, how could it not, right? So subconsciously, a lot of us still desire things like this. Even if we don't think that it's really attainable, we still hold a part of our happiness, right? Of the concept of our happiness hostage to these ideas, right? If I could just have that perfect house or have that mansion or, be that star, or if I can just win the lottery and get that money, right? If I can get that, I don't know what the lottery is here. I think someone told me the other day it's getting close to $1 billion again, right? That like buzzes people. Oh, how much the lottery is right now? And, it kind of like gets you thinking about playing and getting numbers and getting people's birthdays together, right? Because there's an unconscious and subconscious program that has us believing that, if I hit that lottery, I'm definitely going to be happier than I am now. Like, how could I not? Then we have the marriage, that soulmate. If I could just meet the right man, if I could just meet the right woman, the person that meets all of the requirements, even if I don't meet all of their requirements, right? If I can just, have that perfect wedding, have that perfect relationship, then I'm sure, I'll be more happier than I am now. Right? This is the new thing now. Everyone's, body shaming themselves and one another, right? A lot of people are doing augmentation and implants and things like this. So, a lot of men, this is what they wanted. They can get this perfect woman. Oh, they think they would be happy. And then you have women thinking if they can get this perfect body by any means necessary, life will certainly be better for them, right? And the same holds true for the opposite sex, right? If I can just get that 8-pack or a 6-pack or whatever, things would be better for me. And on the same goes for women, right? If I just get a man that looks like that, oh man, how pleasurable will that be? Right? Then we have the concept of the dream job, right? If I can just get that career, if I can get that degree or get that promotion or whatever it is, right? Something else that holds our happiness hostage. And we can't forget the family, right? Oh, well, if I can just get a functional, loving family, when we know this is probably the hardest thing to attain, even harder than the lottery, right? Having a functional, loving family in this day and age with these Western minds, this is almost impossible, right? There's just too many personality conflicts and too many people, running with corrupt program. that prohibits us and prevents us from even moving as a functional, loving family unit. So, with that being said, even though we look at television and we look at famous people all the time people who seem to have these things, the friend that just got married or whoever, when we watch them closely, we see that they're still like not in this perpetual, constant state of happiness. Sometimes people get those things and actually they bring on another load of unhappiness because they have they've attained the things that society has programmed in their unconscious and subconscious mind to attain in order to be happy. And then they have those things and then find that they're not happy. And then the question is like, where do I go from here? And so a lot of times we see in the tabloids and in the news, people who have all the wealth, they're doing frivolous, silly things, right? They're taking drugs, or, you have R. Kelly, he has access to all the so-called beautiful women with the best bodies in the world. And after overindulging in that, he's bored or unhappy again. And so he starts, seeking happiness and pleasure through strange means, right? Means that actually got him in trouble. And so we want to kind of like reassess this concept of happiness, right? And not only do we want to reassess it mentally, we want to do the work, right? We have to engage in the cognitive process to change it. Because a lot of what I'm saying, you've heard before, right? If you haven't heard it before, it sounds rudimentary, like, yeah, duh, right? But the question is, even though I've heard this before, even though I think I know it, and we talked about the difference between knowing something and accepting something in a previous talk. So when we know something, we've actually been able to actualize it and experience it. So until we are experiencing true happiness, it's just a concept that we've accepted. So hearing it again is good, but I'm here to not just, pontificate or talk about it, but more importantly, to offer tools to help you truly find what happiness is and begin to move your life in that direction. So here's another Kemetic proverb. To be satisfied with little is the greatest wisdom, right? So there goes that word wisdom again. And they that increase their riches increase their cares. But a contented mind is a hidden treasure, and trouble find it not. So right there in that proverb, we see that ancient Kemetic way of thinking and way of priming society and programming society is the opposite of what Western society has primed and programmed us to believe. So all those things that I showed you on the previous screen, those were socially engineered in our subconscious and unconscious mind to be things that will bring us happiness. And every time we turn on the television and watch commercials and engage in, Western entertainment, those false desires and attachments to happiness are reinforced over and over and over and over again. So even after hearing something like this, you go back and you start watching TV and, you start seeing the glam and all that. And then it just strengthens that programming that's already there in the unconscious and subconscious mind anyway. And so this proverb is telling you that, true happiness actually comes from being content with less, right? And that the more riches a person has, the more cares, right, and toils they have and concerns. And that actually can impede their ability to be at peace, which contentment means, right? Contentment means being more in a peaceful state of happiness as opposed to engaging in something that you consider to be pleasurable, right? Or feeling good in the moment. So that's what we just said, contentment in a state of peaceful happiness. And pleasure is a feeling of happy satisfaction and enjoyment. So happiness is going through life from pleasure to peace and from peace to pleasure. So this is important. So now we're getting to redefining what happiness is from a higher perspective, right? Happiness is going through life from pleasure to peace, and peace to pleasure. Enjoy when you have it, be at peace when you don't, and enjoy the peace. Enjoy your mate and be at peace if she leaves or dies, and enjoy the peace. Now, this is very lofty. It sounds plain and simple, but we're talking about something that we are not able to practice right now, right? I can read this every day and make it my mantra, but if I do not go into my unconscious mind and find the program that counters this, right, I'm going to still continue to act in that automatic way that I've been acting my entire life, because that program is already set. It's in my personality, it's in my character, it's in my belief system. And so when I hear something like this, although it may resonate with me, I have to do the cognitive piece, I have to do the meditation piece, I have to do the formal meditation and the informal meditation to begin to shift my consciousness so that I can actually manifest this, right? And that is what this is about. We know that in Western society, we have been primed and programmed to believe that it's natural to mourn and be and let our peace go out the window when a loved one dies, right? Some people mourn for weeks, some people mourn for years, some people never get their lives back in order. And so according to Kemetic wisdom teachings, that is not happiness. So this is our natural state of being, right? Absent from social conditioning. So without the social conditioning, without the subconscious and unconscious programming, our natural state of being is to be at peace when we don't have something and to enjoy it when we do. What is the source of sadness but feebleness of mind? Another Kemetic proverb that tells us that sadness is not natural to us. It's not an innate feeling. It is something that occurs when the mind is feeble, when the mind is weak, or when the mind is corrupted with ideologies and beliefs that have us believing that there are times in which we should be sad, right? And so if we believe that and we continue to believe that, then we can never truly find happiness based on that Kemetic concept of what happiness is, right? Because we will constantly go through life believing that, oh, this circumstance deems me to be happy, I'm going to be happy. This circumstance is coming along and is deeming that I be sad, and this is natural, and so let me be sad. And so the Kemetic teachings told us that that is not natural, right? The natural state is to enjoy the things in life that are good when you have them, and enjoy the peace when you don't, or when you lose them. So that leads us to what unhappiness is. Unhappiness is a life that flows from pleasure to pain, pain to pleasure. This is us. This is where we all are, right? I have not met anyone yet that sincerely has mastered this concept of living. Unhappiness is a life that flows from pleasure to pain, pain to pleasure. And this is very interesting because in my studies, and I like taking, I took this from Ra Nefer's book, from his Meta, I think volume 1. And I like this concept because one of the things that I found on my spiritual journey is that there are some schools of thought that, teach or profess that in order to be spiritually enlightened, you should not seek to, you should not enjoy anything, right? you gotta let pleasure go out the window. So you have these people sitting around thinking that, if you're having a good time, you are, unenlightened. And if they're just sitting there like monks and, they're just like, not smiling or having a good time, then they're somehow more spiritually evolved. And so I find that, when we look at Kemetic scripture, that's not true. And I talked about this in the second talk. What we want to do is understand the right enjoyment of life. So as long as the things that we are enjoying is within the scope of Maat, right? It's within righteousness, then it's here for us to enjoy. That's a part of the purpose of life. We talked about that in the last talk, right? So, for those people who come across paths that are very rigid and kind of like don't want you to enjoy life, you can lean on these teachings to understand, well, yeah, I am supposed to enjoy life, but, the rightful enjoyment under, the righteous umbrella under Maat. And so enjoy your mate and wallow in pain when she or he dies, right? This is the Western mind. Unhappiness stems from the mistaken belief that happiness is found in things. Life then flows from pleasure to pain when the object which happiness is associated as the source cannot be had or is lost. And, this is very important because we have to understand what's holding us hostage, right? From being in this state of happiness. It's this programming that we've been given, this Western mind, right? And it's designed the system that we live in is designed, like I said, to continue supporting this. But we have to begin to realize that in order to change this, we have to come to terms with the fact that all of these things that we really sincerely think will make us happy won't make us happy anyway. Because, it's like, how many times have you gotten something that you thought would make you happy, right? Like, I want this new car. And you get it. And then, maybe for the first few days, I bought a convertible. And when I got that convertible, I still enjoy it though. But the first few weeks, it was like, I was in heaven. And then, other things start kicking in, right? Someone, I got a little dent in the car and, how much is that going to cost? And so all of the other things started kicking in right afterwards. And so this is why we don't want to give our happiness, to or credit to things that are outside of us. We want to understand that it's a mind game that we play with ourselves, right? I planted in my own mind because of my desires that if I get this particular car or if I get this particular thing, I'm going to be happy. And so when I get the thing, it's not the thing that makes me happy. It's my mind. I already primed my mind. I told myself when you get this thing, be happy. And so I feel, you feel happy for a little while. And it doesn't take much for anything, something else to come along and then knock that happiness out of place. So as we continue talking, we're going to start talking about how we want to approach acquiring this concept or this state of happiness. So this is our conditioned state of being based on our unconscious and subconscious cultural programming, which is what I just finished saying. So does this mean we are not to suffer pain, right? So here I am, talking about this idea that, life should go from, happiness is moving from pleasure to peace. And so where's the pain in that, right? When we know that pain is a part of life. So it's not the pain that disturbs the peace, it's the perception of the pain and the misunderstanding of the pain that disturbs the peace. So here's another Kemetic proverb. To suffer is a necessity entailed upon our nature. Would you prefer that miracles should protect you from its lessons, or shall you repine? Because it happened to you when, lo, it happened unto all. Suffering is the golden cross upon which the rose of the soul unfolds. Another Kemetic proverb. So again, according to Kemetic teachings, suffering is a necessity, right? When we look at it from this perspective, we see that there's something to be had from suffering, right? And without the suffering, there's no growth, or there's no upward movement, no upward mobility. And of course, without suffering, there's no appreciation for pleasure, right? Because you need to experience one to appreciate the other. So, do we have to suffer physical pain? I remember listening to a lecture from Ra'anefra Amen years ago, and he was like, saying to the audience, if I pulled your fingernails off of you, do you have to be in pain? And I was like, yeah, of course. And, he's like, no, you don't. And I was like, what is he talking about? If someone comes over here and start pulling my fingernails off of me, yes, I have to be in pain, right? My pain receptors are there for that, right? It's going to signal, to my brain that there's something wrong. And it took some years to understand what he was getting at. And so even though we have a physiological makeup, right, to allow us to have that painful experience, we don't have to have it. There are people who learn how to turn up their pain receptors. And it doesn't happen overnight, right? Those people spend years meditating and practicing how to do that one thing, turn off their pain receptors, right? You've seen it. You've seen people do that, and then they walk over coals and they stick hooks into their bodies and they do all these things that we normally couldn't do because it would be too painful. So just like people can spend a lot of time and energy focusing on turning off their pain receptors, we can retrain ourselves to look at pain from another perspective so that it's not creating this stressful anxiety and disturbing our peace. So the physical pain is there for a reason. It serves a purpose, right? If I turn off my pain receptors and then I'm walking, somewhere and I walk on a rusty nail and the nail sticks me through my shoe, my pain receptors are turned off. Woo, right? I developed this great skill, but now I don't know that I have a rusty nail in my foot. That's not going to benefit me, right? So the pain receptors are there for a reason. It's the same thing with emotional pain, but we have misunderstood what the emotional pain stands for. So the question is, do we have to suffer from mental pain? Not when we learn and evolve as a result. So the purpose of emotional pain, right? And we're going to talk about that in particular in a minute. It's very similar to that of physical pain. It's there to signal, there's a problem, right? Physical pain signals, there's a problem with your body. You need to do something about it. Emotional pain is very similar. It's signaling to you that there's something wrong internally, right? There's something wrong with your programming, or there is something wrong in your environment that needs your attention. So constantly trying to avoid pain or replace it with pleasure can become problematic. And this is why, because we all know about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, right? Here's another proverb: to change your mood or mental state, change your vibration. And so, for example, when we think about the things that make us emotionally stressed out, right? Whenever we're in a situation and we're emotionally stressed out, we're unhappy, we are not in our divine nature, because we already said that the divine nature is to go from pleasure to peace, peace to pleasure, right? Some people, they just go for the peace. That's fine if that's what you want as well. So as I said, pain is a protective measure, right? But it's been misused and abused. Pain was originally, right, designed to let us know that we were in imminent danger, right? Tigers, lions, and bears. As human beings, we've evolved to a point where we really have eradicated most of the imminent danger, right? Most of the things that could have been predators for us are gone. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. But yet we are still dying, mostly from stress-related illnesses. And there's really nothing really scary or stressful in our environment that really demands our sympathetic nervous system to be constantly aroused, right? But yet it is. And so pain is designed to teach us about the real dangers. It's also information derived from pain. Information derived from pain can be passed down genetically. So in the work that I do at Ra Reiki, a lot of times I work with clients, and a lot of the pain and the negative energy that they're dealing with was handed down to them genetically. Now, this is actually a positive thing when it's done for legitimate causes. But unfortunately, people, especially people who have endured slavery, right? We have post-traumatic slave syndrome. And so a lot of the fears and inhibitions that our ancestors had to experience, it got passed down to us genetically, right? And so we have to now contend with those emotional triggers that ignites the sympathetic nervous system, which causes stress. This is one of the reasons why there's a lot of stress-related diseases in the Black community, in addition to modern day oppression. Unresolved painful impressions from previous lifetimes can affect us in this lifetime. And I'm going to share a personal example with this one for you all. So like doing this talk show for me is not enjoyable because I have had to deal with social anxiety throughout my life. And I learned on my spiritual journey that in a previous lifetime, or probably more than one, I've taken on the role of a martyr. And so we know that martyrs usually, things don't end well for them, right? They deal with betrayal, they deal with persecution and things like that. And so even in this lifetime, still having some of those impressions, I've had to deal with that socially, whenever, I usually say or do things typically against the grain. And usually people don't, take to that really well. And so because of that, putting myself out here like this and getting out here and putting up a video is difficult. So I actually have to use formal and informal meditation to overcome this particular painful impression from a previous lifetime, and then from things that I've experienced in this lifetime. And so these are some of the things that give rise to us losing that sense of peace, right? These are some of the things that causes the emotional disturbances that make us quote unquote unhappy. And then we have socially engineered emotional pain, right, is the most common stimulant of the sympathetic nervous system. What am I talking about here? Most of the time, the things that upset us now, right, and when we get upset, we know what we're talking about. We're talking about the sympathetic nervous system getting ignited. And if we look at this chart over here, when the sympathetic nervous system gets ignited, all of these things happen, right? We get into the fight or flight mode, and the body is in a stress-induced state. And so it actually affects our organs, right? We have unnecessary adrenaline and fight or flight hormones in the blood. And so all of this is a stress on the body. And so now if we sit down and we count how many times a day or how many times a week we are finding ourselves emotionally stressed out by so-called people or situations, we will see that we are constantly igniting our sympathetic nervous system, taking us out of a place of happiness unnecessarily. And so physical pain signals that there is something wrong with our body. Emotional pain signals that there is something wrong with our mind or our programming. Happiness cannot be attained without infallible guidance, wisdom, which is the word or voice of God, and spiritual power. So let's go back to this emotional pain signals that there is something wrong with our mind or programming. All right, so let's just use a basic example. All right, you have someone who was in a relationship, right? They attracted a person into their life. They thought that the person was good for them. Things seemed to be going well. And then they learned that, let's just say this time, the man learned that the woman was cheating on him, or that she was using him for his money and cheating on him. And so when he gets the news, right, of course, he loses the relationship, he loses her, but also he's upset because he felt used, he felt abused and things of that nature, right? So the situation moves him from a place of happiness to a place of sadness, right? The feeble-minded concept that we talked about. And so if we pause and we apply this Kemetic wisdom teaching to it, we would have to say, well, let's stop and see what really happened, right? What did this person give his sense of happiness to, right? What did he allow to hold his happiness hostage? So 9 times out of 10, probably 10 times out of 10, when we find ourselves in relationships with people, and it doesn't only have to be a romantic relationship. It could be relationships with an organization, relationships with family members, or friends or companies. And when we have a breakup or something wrong happens, if we take time to really assess ourselves and why that situation affected us in a negative way, we'll find that the painful event is there to show us that there's something wrong in our programming. So going back to that example, right? 10 times out of 10, if we don't love ourselves unconditionally, which most of us don't, because we were not taught how to love ourselves unconditionally, which is the topic of the next show, like what that is and how to do it. So we were not taught how to love ourselves unconditionally. And then we have some self-care or some root energy center issues surrounding self-esteem, self-concept, pride and those things. Then we are not in a position to attract someone into our life that's going to love us unconditionally and do right by us, right? Because we don't have the capacity to do that, because we don't have that flowing through our own program, right? That's not part of our root energy center programming yet. And so when we are in these situations where these relationships went bad, if we can, have the guidance to help us sift through all the emotional pain and all of the baggage and say, okay, well, what was this painful experience trying to show me about me, right? Not about her or him or them. It's about me. Then we can get to the root of that particular thing that attracts that kind of situation scenario to us. And then we can begin to mitigate it, right? So that we no longer attract those type of situations to us. And when they do happen, right, we just know, that means I still have more work to do in that particular area. So this is a part of the cognitive piece of learning how to stop moving from a place of pleasure, right, to a place of pain. Pain to pleasure, pleasure, pain, 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 more pain, a little bit of pleasure, right? We want to develop true happiness, which is moving from what? From what? From what, right? From pleasure to peace, peace to pleasure. And for some people, they just want to be at peace, and that's fine too, right? But what we want to mitigate is the painful piece, because when we allow ourselves to go into this painful state of being, we activate the sympathetic nervous system unnecessarily, creating a stressful environment for our bodies, creating the dis-ease that we are all dealing with, right? This is one of the reasons why the Western culture or society can sell a lot of drugs and alcohol, because people don't have any other way of knowing how to take control of the pain. And so to add insult to injury, right, we get this program through enculturation, Western enculturation, and then part of that program tells you to self-medicate so that you don't have to really deal with the anxiety and the pain, that you willingly accept it because you believe that that's your true nature. And so the Kemetic mystic way of looking at things is to understand that that is not your true nature. And so this proverb is this quote from Ron Nefer is very important, because even though you're listening to this, right, even though I know this, it's a process that we have to go through to fix the corrupt programming that allows us to continually go from pain to pleasure, pleasure to pain. And it cannot be fixed and done without guidance and wisdom. And so the Ra Reiki healing system is a tool that can be used to assist those who are ready to begin moving towards true happiness. And if you haven't gotten it by now, true happiness is not attaining those things that you believe will make you happy. Attaining your heart's desires, unless your heart's desire is realignment, right? Going back to talk 2, fulfilling your divine purpose by realigning yourself with supreme consciousness. That is the only desire that is sustainable. That is the only desire that will bring you total fulfillment. But along the way, it's okay to enjoy life as long as it's the rightful enjoyment of life, and you are moving from enjoying life to being at peace, and from being at peace to enjoying life. And with that, I say dua to everyone for listening. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. All right. If there's no questions or comments, it's good to see you out there. Those of you who have made your comments, I appreciate those. So I will ask a question, and you can put your answer in the chat if you like to. So has this talk helped you to understand happiness from another perspective? Anyone? Okay, so thank you, Anel. I appreciate that. All right, so what about the concept of taking something that you heard? So we all heard this, right? And now how do we take this information and begin to actualize it? I would like someone to explain to me how they intend or how they think they will be able to begin actualizing this information so that they can move towards being truly happy. Thank you, Aunt Deborah. Dua, I am that I am. And one of the things that I want to reiterate, just in case I didn't make it clear, right? All of this is in degrees, right? We want to kind of like take the information and then begin to apply it in degrees. We need tools to do it. There are our Reiki system offer tools. There are other tools out there. But it's not something that we can just automatically make happen overnight. So with everything we do on a spiritual journey, we do it with love and peace, towards ourselves. We don't put pressure on ourselves and get angry with ourselves. And there is no perfection overnight. A lot of people are looking for perfection in teachers. When you find the perfect teacher, let me know. Some people don't follow any teacher or anyone because they're looking for perfection. The growth of someone else can't really be measured by you, right? The only growth that we can measure is our only growth. We can only measure our own growth. So I'm just encouraging everyone to be gentle with yourself on this path, and to embrace, your movement, and however fast or slow that goes for you. All right. And so if there is no other comments or questions, we are approaching the end of the hour. And I thank you all again. Our next show will be on February 7th. So we only meet on the first and third Sundays of the month. And so our next talk will be on the 7th, and it will be on what is love truly. And we just got another, comment in there. Accepting the concept of peace and happiness will help with having a temperament and contentment. Very nice. Dua. All right. And for those of you who have access to me, I'm always here. If you have additional questions or comments, or just want to talk a little bit more about any of these things, always feel free to reach out to me. And so hopefully I will see you all on the 7th. Invite a friend, a family member, or a loved one who you think will benefit from these wisdom talks. And until then, continue to be blessed and live in your divine light. Peace and love. Hetep.